welcome back to Raising the Frequency with Tim and Shannon. Let's bring in our guest, Aeron Lazar. I hope we're saying your last name right, Aeron, are we?
Yes, we are, because we had him on a little while ago. I don't know if you remember, but I do. Aeron.
You did?
We did, okay.
Welcome, welcome. So this is a hot topic because I think there's a lot of misinterpretation of starseeds, and like everyone, like Ash was saying, everyone thinks they're a starseed, and so being overplayed, and everyone wants to be a starseed, but doesn't just make you a starseed, does it?
No, I think, you know, it's the previous person that was speaking has got a really good point. You know, everybody wants to feel like there's something bigger and all the rest of it. But, you know, I in my experience, I can only speak from my own sort of consciousness experience, and having worked with thousands of people and being able to read the sort of Galactic Hall of Records, I can see where people have come from. There's way more than 144,000. I'm not saying that doesn't mean every single human being on Earth is a starseed. Of course not, because, you know, what does that mean? That means what, the entire universe is emptied and come to Earth? You know, it doesn't make any logical sense, does it? So, you know, it's there are obviously starseeds amongst us, and, you know, but my sort of understanding from many data points is that there's sort of way more than 144,000. But it's such a fascinating subject. I love it. So
it is, you know, yeah. And I think what you're saying is you're right on, because I think there's a lot more to it. Now, in your experience, or what your thoughts or belief, because a lot of this, you know, people try to source this, and I don't think that you could go back to a source other than, like, you're not going to find a Bible on it, at least not that I know of. You may get downloads from people in the past. I know Steiner talked about it back in the 70s and others, but you almost, it's an intuitive understanding. You almost have to fall back on that, because you really can't take it any further than that. It's not that you're going to see it in the Vatican Library. Oh, you never know. You may find it there one of these days. Who knows? But with the starseeds and this 144,000, is there a unique trait of a starseed? Do they have a certain psychic skill set you're seeing? Is there something unique about them that stands out amongst other humans, outside of them just feeling, you know, the criteria of wanting to help humanity?
Yeah, so you know, if you go back to when we were all children, I mean, I'm an Arcturian starseed, for instance, and I've connected to my sort of family and felt that connection. But, you know, it's what the more people I speak to, everybody kind of feels the same when we're sort of smaller. So you just feel like there's something bigger. You can't really explain it. You feel like there's something big. You don't feel like you fit in particularly. So, you know, I look at myself as a child, and as an example, I had a normal childhood, doing the camping, fishing, playing sports, playing rugby, this kind of thing. But also I had this sort of burning curiosity about the paranormal, about UFOs. I'd be conducting sort of paranormal experiments when I was sort of 8 years old and things like this. So I think, you know, we're on different sort of scales of what the mainstream would call weird, really. So we don't kind of typically fit in. But there's just this underlying feeling, even from small. I remember from 7 or 8 years old, just feeling like I was here for something bigger, and I couldn't put words on it back then. I didn't know what it meant. But typically, that's what you'll see from like a childhood perspective. Everybody will resonate with that. But then what's super interesting as well is that all you know, starseeds come from different races. So there's hundreds and hundreds of races out there, extraterrestrial races, and we've all lived lives outside of being human. And depending what race you come from, you carry that energy within your field. And so you will see it reflected as personality traits in this lifetime. It's super interesting. So like I say, I've worked with so many people. I see this all over the place. And when I explain this to people, I'll read where they come from. I'll be able to read their frequency and say, okay, well, this is how you are. This is how you see the world. And they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize. And then they start to understand themselves in sort of the deepest way. So it's super cool, super interesting subject.
Starseeds sometimes don't know that they're starseeds.
They can't put a name on it. So when you're a kid, I didn't know at 8 years old that I was a starseed. I just thought I was weird, or I just felt. But I thought, oh, do you know what? There's something bigger. But I'll find the answers as I kind of go through life, kind of thing. And then it's only when I had this great awakening and I started to connect into these higher sort of states of consciousness and sort of tune into communicate and channel various races and get these downloads of understanding and perspective, that it all started to make sense. And so, like I say, the answers do come. But when we're small, obviously we've all gone through this veil of forgetfulness, and why we go through the veil of forgetfulness, I don't know. It's the most ironic thing ever, but it is a thing. So it's not a case of learning; it's a case of remembering. Really, that's what it's
Let me get this. Okay, if reincarnation is real and starseeds are real, then how come some people are starseeds and others are mere humans?
Okay, so just to answer that, we bounce around as souls all over the place. So we don't just reincarnate as humans. And within the Akashic realm, there's 2 halls of records or blocks. So you've got the terrestrial Hall of Records, which is a record of every single lifetime you've lived as a human. There's also the Galactic Hall of Records, which is all of the extraterrestrial stuff. And all of that is contained within your DNA. So the Akashic Records is within you on a cellular level. Like if you were to take all the information in your DNA and to put it in a book, you're talking about a 1,000,000-page book. There's so much information in there. So the answers are always within. So like all of this stuff you've lived through. And like I say, you haven't just been human, you've been sort of all over the place. And yes, there was a call that went out for Starseeds. So I think the common consensus is around when the atomic bombs were going off. There was kind of a call of the planet that went out because we were kind of destroying ourselves. But not every single soul answered the call. Like there was a general call that went out. It wasn't just, okay, I'm just going to call this person or this person. It was like this general SOS that went out from the planet. And not everybody answered it. And that's kind of cool, because if there was just this mass exodus of every soul coming to Earth, then the universe would be emptying.
There'd be no challenge.
No, exactly. Exactly.
You mentioned the Akashic Records. That's fascinating, because I do understand, and I've listened to a lot of Edgar Casey, and he taps into the Akashic Records, and like you and many other people have that psychic skill set do, and that's really
what is that for people like me? That
it's like the Bible of humanity. It's like the records of why we're here on a past life reasons and all this stuff, and it taps into. And then people get downloads from all the information, you know. But you know, interesting now, talk about science. Billy Carson talks about how on a pin, like our DNA is so incredibly a hard drive that on a pinhead of our DNA, you could download billions of bytes of information. In fact, in all our DNA, you could house up to 6 billion years of information in our DNA. So I'm like, well, if that's fact, then why wouldn't we have the whole history of everything all within ourselves? It's like we are the Akashic Records ourselves. Are we not a download of that, right?
That's completely correct. Absolutely spot on.
Heavy.
And just the way I try and explain it, because I mean, you know, I sort of like I coach people. I'm a sort of spiritual teacher, but you know, rather than if you really want people to understand, you can't talk in flowery sort of ascension language because it's difficult for people to kind of comprehend it. So let's kind of break it down into simple language as to what's easy to understand. So your DNA or your Akashic Records is basically a ledger, if you want to think in terms of blockchain, or a record of every single thing you've done. Like this radio show now is being now recorded in my Akashic Records and your Akashic Records, because we're going through it in real time. Some of those records have karma attached to them because, and some don't. So like I'm picking up my coffee cup now, that's now stored up in mine. And the fact that I told you it's stored in yours, but there's no karma attached to that. Some of the records are just records, but others have karma attached to them. And there's above, to try and describe it, there's another layer above the cellular data, which is your karma. It's like a big, I call it karmic field of energy. And that's basically karma, as we all know, it's like an energetic IOU that we have to pay through experience, basically. So it's super, super fascinating.
I believe you reap what you sow here on Earth. Well, so you're saying it's deep. So you could have done things in other lifetimes, and now you have to pay the price, basically.
Generational DNA being passed on down. You know, the sins of the father, like in the Bible. See, I think the Bible speaks a lot about what you're talking about, just in a different terminology. You know, and I think a lot of that's misinterpreted or whatever the case may be on either side potentially. But I think we're really all talking about the same thing, you know, in many ways.
100%.
But
100%.
But what I find fascinating that you got to acknowledge the starseed as an extraterrestrial experience here. This is something like, you know, and if you think about it, this is what I would tell folks all the time, and tell me if you concur, that, you know, do you believe your soul is from Earth?
No.
Okay. Then if our soul's not from Earth, it's not terrestrial, then it has to be extraterrestrial, right? So aren't we all extraterrestrials just to begin with, right? I'm not alone, so let's start there.
I'm God's daughter. That's all I know.
Okay. And you are. Exactly.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's contradicting anything. But okay, so here we are. Let's just go with this for a second, and let's go a little bit deeper into the purposes of starseeds. So you have a lot of people say these what do you call them? NCPs,
non-player characters,
NPCs. I don't know if that's so true or not, because it just kind of
very human.
It kind of humanizes other human beings in many ways, right? And I think that's part of a
Well, look at the
an Anunnaki trait,
That they're just going to slaughter blind sheep.
Okay.
So that's what they mean.
Okay.
I think, by that.
But what are some of the top purposes you believe, Aeron? Why the starseeds are so critical now, and what are they doing? Like they're among us. Well, how do we point them out, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, it's not a case of finger pointing or pointing anybody out. People need to start to remember this stuff and go within themselves and identify themselves based on some of the stuff that we were talking about. But to answer your question, what's the point of starseeds? Like, okay, the call went out. Now what? Okay, they've come. Everyone's come to us. Now what? Now what's the plan? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we've all got starseeds have got what's called a soul contract. And so when I say the word contract, don't bring this sort of 3D human analogy like a mortgage contract or a lease on a car, or there's these onerous legal terms that if you don't stick to it, there's going to be consequences, kind of thing. I prefer, rather than a soul contract, I prefer to call it like an alignment blueprint. So people who are coming to Earth, they've come here for a reason. And typically when I've read people's sort of galactic, I've done galactic starseed readings and things like this. And typically what I see is where they've elected to come here. So and by the way, that means extraction. So you're giving up your old life on another planet, wherever that is, possibly a family, possibly, a nice life that you've got there. And your soul and consciousness is extracted, and it's not painful or anything, and then you basically incarnate here. But before you do that, you've come for a reason. So typically what I see is that is linked to people's specialisms. So people have come here for logistics, people have come here to heal. I've seen people come here around medicine. I've seen people come in here to anchor frequency into the planet from a gridwork perspective, because not only are human beings, we're going through this ascension curve at the minute, and that basically is like this collective great awakening. We're seeing it over the last 3 years. People are waking up to what's going on, and currently they're looking at the system going, okay, now what, kind of thing. It's that this is the part of this great awakening. And also the planet is evolving as well, the frequency of the planet. So it just totally and utterly depends. I've seen such a broad range of the reasons why people came. My sort of alignment blueprint, my soul contract is this. So talking about spirituality, teaching it, helping people awaken, helping people realize who they truly are. But it just totally and utterly depends on what your specialism was, where you came from. That's basically
You said you leave your family? You leave your family there, like to be fend for themselves?
Yeah. Well, no, not fend for themselves, but I mean, it's like, don't think like, you're the mom or the dad and you're leaving your kids and you're coming down here. Like, I've never seen a situation like that. Usually you're an older soul. So like, let's say your kids would be matured and be living their lives at that point, or the children are in sort of 20s or 30s and they decided to come. And sometimes it's emotional. Like sometimes I see the goodbyes. And I feel the pride from the parents' perspective that, their son or daughter is going off to do this big thing. And I can feel that emotion when I'm reading people. And so, but there's an understanding that, there's a bigger purpose to this, and it's a kind of noble thing to kind of go and do. So yes, there are sort of sometimes families that are kind of separated because of it, but you need to understand that when you're sort of extraterrestrial, you've got a more elevated perspective. So you can see that this isn't your first barbecue. You see, it's not your last barbecue. Okay. They know what's kind of going on, so they can see the bigger picture. So it's not so bad, I guess. Really.
And one of the big things with that understanding is you're not scared of death as usual, human being, because you have that remembrance to a certain degree. But speaking of remembering, and more so speaking of the purposes here, like you said, I think it was brilliantly stated that we all come for different purposes. But is that just a random experience that you choose in a lifetime, or is there an orchestration? Is there a person who has a strategy or a group that's strategizing? Okay, we need you go over here. You guys go deal with this. You deal with the secret space program. You deal with waking up people healing themselves. Is there a strategy going on to try to wake this world up, or is it just a random individual experience?
It comes down to individual free will, and so there's no management in structure managing starseeds. So there's no like corporate entity going, "Come on, starseed, you go here, you go here, you go here."
There's no boss, Tim.
There's no strategy here. How are we going to win this thing? All right.
I know. It seems crazy, but it literally comes down to free will. I've never seen some kind of structure or order to it in that way. It just seems totally individual.
I'm just curious. What do you think about Jesus? And God.
I think Jesus and Mary Magdalene are ascended masters. I think they walked the earth. I think they came down to show what was possible, but I think humanity's consciousness level at that time wasn't ready for it. And look what happened. And unfortunately, and I think that there's been others as well. So you look at Buddha. You could talk about the other ones from the other religions as well. And I feel like there have been visitors. Like I know people who channel Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and that frequency is just exquisite. It's the most beautiful frequency I've ever felt. It's literally exquisite. I can't even put it in words. Don't even just do it justice.
Well, see,
so I do. Sorry.
No, you're right. I'm glad you're saying that, because if you look at the certain Bible perspectives, it can almost be interpreted that way too. I mean, depending on how you look at it, or it may not be. But let me ask you a question.
Mary Magdalene fell and then she came back, so she's very human. She was very human. Her story is very human.
Okay, now that's the story of people coming in, like you say, ascended masters, and waking up, trying to shake the status quo up here for people to wake up to what? What are they trying to wake themselves up to? That what? What are we waking up to?
Well, basically, we're talking about fifth dimensional consciousness. And, this goes back to the days of Lemuria, it goes back to the days of Atlantis. We were almost at the point where we collectively awakened then. But then basically there was a big conflict, ego took over, and we basically failed. That's the reality. And it's just, we've had to start again. And now we are just at this point now, and where we are starting to collectively awaken. And to go through this ascension, sort of curve. And what that means, basically, when you talk about fifth dimensional consciousness, it's just, I did a video on TikTok about this the other day, and it's basically, it's just operating from a place of unconditional love. It's healing everything the matrix has laid on you, because like life sucks, like it's hard, it hurts, Yeah. And so if we can heal this kind of stuff, and then we start to have this sort of elevated perspective over the world, where we come from a place of unconditional love, and we love one another no matter what. Because I know that above the karmic fields of energy within the Akashic realm, you've got this unity consciousness field. And this is basically, it's almost it's close to source energy. We're all reflections of that energy. So like when I see it now, you are a reflection of me, I'm a reflection of you. We're all reflections of one another and made of this same energy. Right. So when we look at one another, we need to start to treat one another a bit better, because you wouldn't mistreat yourself. Technically, by mistreating somebody else, you're mistreating yourself, because we're all sort of reflections of each other.
The Bible, love thy neighbor as thyself. Yes, you're supposed to love yourself and love others, period. It sounds so easy, but it's so hard when you're a mere human. This is what I don't understand about the starseeds. How are some are more evolved than others, is basically what it comes down to.
Well, I don't think evolved. Like we're all born divine, right? We're all just infinite, just incredible beings. All it is just some people have started. It's not a case of some people are more evolved. That means some people are more advanced than others. Some people have just started healing sooner. That's all it is. Mm-hmm. I look at anybody. If you're born with a soul, a consciousness, and a pineal gland, you can access anything I can. You've just never been taught how to operate the equipment you've been born with. That's it. We're all the same, honestly.
Yeah.
So nobody's more evolved, nobody's more advanced. Some people just started doing it a bit sooner, that's all.
And you're right, because if we're all coming from light and love, then we're all really on, I would say, equal ground, but all coming from the same source. So it's all one, same, right? So, so this, it's some are waking up faster or more conscious of certain levels of consciousness than others, right? But point being is, are we waking up to the fact that, like you said, unconditional love, that we are mighty, powerful spiritual beings, that we have the power within us, we have the DNA, we have everything that we need right here, and that's really the second coming,
that's what Jesus says. That's
the second coming and the awakening of that, and is that not really the ultimate purpose of even being here?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I prophesied, when was it? Probably 2.5 years ago now, it got given to me of when this changeover really starts. And I was given, I'll stick it out there. I've stuck this out there on social media. June, July 2024 is when it starts. So sort of the middle of next year is where you're really going to see the existing sort of matrix start to fall away.
Okay.
You're going to see mass awakening events, whether that's going to be people uprising against authority. I don't know. I'm not manifesting that because I want it to be as peaceful as possible, but you're definitely going to see a big changing of the guard. And what we're going to start is going to be a new dawn of the ages for humanity. I was given this 2.5 years ago, but then since then, I'm a big sort of studier of Chinese metaphysics, feng shui. We're moving into period 9, which is a more spiritual period. There's astrological stuff going on. So all roads seem to be pointing towards June, July.
Do you think a lot of people that are going to die, this is going to get morbid for a moment there, because everything that I've researched, when you start researching Agenda 2030 and whatnot, by 2025, they want a certain amount of population dead. So if that's the truth, where are those people, and how come they can't stay to see what happens? Are those the non-player characters? As
you're going off the Deagle website that was supposedly deleted, right?
Yeah.
So that data, So it's kind of what I've learned to take is, and this last 3 years has taught me to be super cautious with the information that I'm taking in, and because I can't go back and verify that, I'm not putting any sort of FUD on what that person has written, but supposedly that's disappeared offline. That could have been doctored, that sheet of numbers. Do you know what I mean? It's not possible to check.
It's not just the Deagle report you're referring to, Aaron. You're looking at Noahide laws are gearing up, and this is part of the agenda too, the one world religion, the one world currency. There's been a lot
of things gearing up, as you would say.
The one world currency, the one religion, the one world army. This is what they're prepping for. I've seen New Age get hijacked just as much as I've seen Christianity get hijacked, and if people don't acknowledge what's coming forward with this one world order and one world religion, which is under the guise of love, right? But yet it's all about beheading people who don't believe in your God, right? And it's all about this level of FEMA camps and corruption. So I want to make sure this, the New Age and Starseeds are aware of that,
Yes. Yeah, I think what it is. There's going to be 2 timelines that kind of open up, and what you're going to. We're going through a sort of an orchestrated, engineered banking crisis at the minute. What's going to happen off the back of that collapse? They're going to come in with the CBDC, with trumpets going, this is the most amazing thing. And then that's basically digital prison. Yeah. That's one timeline. And everybody plays their part. You said it's going to be morbid for a second. Everybody plays their role. But it's kind of, the reality is, let's be real here, not everyone's going to make it. That's just the reality. But I just kind of, I feel like if people are watching this show and people are sort of interested in spirituality, people would have enough self-awareness to have made sure that they're going to be on timeline 2, which is going to be the freedom and the new age for humanity, basically. Yeah. So I think if you're awakened to the matrix, let's say, I think you're going to be on the right side and the right timeline. Right. It's going to be fine.
Thank you so much, Aaron. What a great guest.
Aaron, how can people reach you and keep track?
So thank you for that. AeronLazar.com, all social platforms, including TikTok. I would say, come across on Instagram. I'd love a few more followers on Instagram. That'd be pretty cool. I've got an amazing program on our website called the Quantum Club. That's for any starseeds or light workers out there. That's an amazing community that we've got. Check that out on my website. And yeah, all social platforms and on the website would be best. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
No, absolutely, Aeron. Thank you. Brilliant information, guys. When we get back, we have news.
We don't know.
And yes,
There
we
it
do.
is.
And I know. And we have more to come and more to share. And there's so many more questions I wanted to ask him about. I want to ask him about the walk-ins and things like that. But maybe we'll ask Christiane when she comes on too as well. But more to come, guys. Stay tuned. We'll see you in 1 minute.